Hey guys, I'm Annie Allen, a certified divorce coach, RCSD divorce realtor, and your host for the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery podcast, the show that's all about bringing you the practical, professional help you need as you divorce and hope for creating a life you'll love after. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want to dive deep into the wholehearted wisdom of how to have a better divorce experience than everyone else you know by changing what you do, this is the podcast for you. After a lifetime in dysfunctional relationships and over a decade in recovery, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning, along with the collective wisdom of amazing divorce professionals and divorce survivors. Because I believe the keys to a better divorce and healthier relationships to come should never be a secret. The enlightening and unconventional wisdom you'll find here is actionable and sometimes even fun, like friends chatting over coffee. So come listen in for a fresh, honest look at doing divorce differently. Starting Over Stronger is here for you, for the help and hope you need before, during, and after your divorce. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery show. I'm excited today to welcome CDFA Jen Lawrence, who is here to talk about a pressing subject that I know many of my divorce coaching clients need to know more about, and that is financial abuse. Hello and welcome to the show, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, very good. Well, I know most people don't call it financial abuse because they don't know to. They say things like, I have no idea how much money he makes. He doesn't let me touch the accounts. I get an allowance each week, and that's all she lets me spend. He won't let me work. He sabotages every effort I've ever made to begin a career. It's her money or his money, all of those kind of key phrases that
exactly
let us know that something untoward is happening. But I'm sure you've heard statements like that for years as well with your clients. So we're just going to explore that and talk about what it is and how to escape it from a professional financial advisor's viewpoint. And so thank you for being here to share that with us.
Thank you for having me on. I'm sure this will be very instructive and helpful for a lot of people listening. So I'm so glad that you wanted to have discussion of this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a CDFA and a divorce coach as well. The space I practice in is helping women facing divorce deal with their money issues. So a lot of money trauma. And a lot, just exactly as you said, it stems from financial abuse, but it isn't a term that a lot of people know.
Yeah.
So as we're doing an exploration as to why people feel so stuck in the financial conversations that arise as an inevitable part of the divorce process.
Yeah.
We do start to unpack that there may in fact have been financial abuse at play. Money has often been weaponized, and it's something that I see across all income levels. It happens when very affluent marriages, money is a tool of control, and it happens, less so. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree. It does. It happens every which way. So let's just kind of define it first. What is financial abuse? I mean, we threw out some phrases that kind of give away a little bit of what it is. But
so financial abuse, which often is also called economic abuse because it goes beyond sort of just controlling bank accounts. And as you mentioned, it gets into controlling people being able to earn a living. So it gets into working control. It's a method of coercive control. So it is intimate partner violence. And it's really whenever money, the ability to work and earn money is used to manipulate or intimidate or to entrap someone in a toxic marriage. So there are people who, they've made a joint decision in their marriages where one partner will handle the money and the other partner, say, handles more parenting issues and things like that. So it's not de facto financial abuse. It's when money is being used to control someone. It's when you know, have asked your partner to talk about where is the money, how much do you earn, and that's not forthcoming. It's, you know, so it's not like if people have, you know, the envelope system or budgeting. Sometimes in divorce, people are saying, oh, is that financially abusive? Well, no, if you've agreed to manage your money in a certain way, then that's just how people manage it. It's when it's used to control you. So, you know, if it's people being put on an allowance, you hear a lot about this, particularly with if there's one parent who's stay at home. And again, that's different than, you know, here is the money that we have collectively decided that one can spend in a week. It's using it to control somebody.
To keep their capacity limited.
Absolutely. And it is the number one reason why most people who want a divorce do not proceed with divorce, because they feel that they don't have the financial resources to find an apartment if they want to leave an abusive relationship, to hire a lawyer. Most lawyers require a retainer. So it can be very toxic in divorce. And that's why a lot of people aren't really clear that they're being financially abused until the point where they want to leave, because that's when they really find out how trapped they are and how controlled they have been.
Yeah. And how common do you think it is?
Well, it is found in like 97% of cases of abuse. So, you know, for women, that's 1 in 4. For men, that's 1 in 9. And we tend to see it more with women simply because of the wage gap. I mean, the partner who earns less is more vulnerable when it comes to financial abuse. But you know, there are men who are vulnerable as well. And it can be creating debts in someone else's name. Because, you know, in marriage, it is a financial partnership. And if someone's going and, you know, creating these huge debts and you aren't aware of it and can't control it, that can also be abusive.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on how to spot it? I guess really even in yourself to recognize that maybe you're being financially abused, because, you know, you mentioned earlier that maybe you've agreed to this. And I think there's some level of that in my own life and my own past experience where I can say with conviction that I was being financially abused, but I was a participant in it for a very long time. It was a decision that I made and I thought it was a good decision. I wasn't aware of the way that I was limiting and hurting myself in the process. So how does somebody come to that realization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone should know their money situation. So, you know, it's something, again, like people try to make it overly complex. I find a lot of finance people, you know, they use a lot of acronyms and buzzwords. But you should know how much money is coming in, where it's coming in, how it's being invested, how it's being given away, how it's being spent. And the reality is, even if you are in a happy marriage, something can happen to the other partner. I mean, I had an aunt who was in a beautiful marriage, and her husband, you know, very traditional, used to fill a drawer in the kitchen with $20 bills. And she was just, that was her ATM. And he died. And she suddenly had to learn everything. And so even if you're not anticipating divorce, I think it's a good idea to just, you know, sit down and say, I want to start to understand our money situation. And a big red flag is if the other partner is saying, like, don't worry yourself about that, I'm controlling that, that's none of your business. That's the point when you might start to think, I wonder if this is a tool of control. Because a lot of people have just said, I don't want to have anything to do with the money. And that's an agreed upon part of your partnership. But I just think it's really smart because life, I mean, COVID has shown us life can throw some crazy turns our way. And the time when you don't want to be learning about money is when you're at a point of crisis.
Right.
You know, when you're grieving a spouse, if, you know, something's happening with a child, you know, that's not the time when you want to be figuring it out. You want to figure it out when things are actually going well.
Yeah. You know, you had sent me some information in preparation for our talk today that I found interesting, a quote from the Sagesi Women of Affluence final report. I don't know if you know which one I'm referring to, but, you know, when you said that earlier about, you know, it's one thing if you're agreeing to a certain arrangement, but if you're agreeing to that arrangement without all of the information, that's just bad business. And I make the reference to business because oftentimes in divorce, especially for your attorney, this is a business arrangement that's having to be determined. And I love this quote. It says, in a work relationship where one doesn't act in good faith, it's called embezzlement. When it happens in a marriage, if one steals the life savings of the other or in any other way financially abuses somebody, you call that what? A bad marriage.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
I love that quote. And I think it really shows that, in other areas, this is considered a crime. Mm-hmm. Whereas within a marriage, there's less protection, which is why in divorce, when the law starts to, you've got the power of the law behind you, mm-hmm. and there are processes like financial disclosure where the other party has to disclose what's happening with the money situation. That's often when this is brought to light. Mm-hmm. And so, even if you have not a great marriage and you're, thinking about, should I stay? Should I go? It's a really good time to have the money conversation because it tends to be a bit of a forcing function. I mean, mm-hmm. sometimes, there will be, especially, I deal a lot with women who've stayed at home for most of their lives. And then, as the kids are fleeing the nest, there's sort of an identity crisis going on. And often mm-hmm. people think, I don't have any control over my life or my money. And by having the conversation saying, I want to start taking some of the responsibility on financially, that's mm-hmm. a huge relief for the partner who's been taking that on all this time. So it can help a marriage, but mm-hmm. if it has been an element of control, you're going to see that right away. Yeah. And again, that's going to help inform you with that should I stay or should I go decision. And it's stuff that you'll need to know in a divorce for sure. So you might as well sort of start that process now. It may have great results. It may bring you closer together, or it may give you a crystal clear picture mm-hmm. that, this is something I need to watch for. And then, the lawyer you hire, the divorce process you choose, to mediate or to litigate, will very much be colored by if there's financial abuse, because, mm-hmm. You may not want to do the DIY divorce if you want a lawyer to force financial disclosure, if you think money's been hidden, for example. Mm-hmm. Or, if there are debts you think might be in your name that you want disclosed. So I just always find no one wants to talk about money, but it's one of those really important conversations, whether you have a great marriage or a horrible marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And I think it's similar to something that I find myself saying often about the year 2020, because people find out I work with the divorce population and they say, oh, I bet you're busy because of 2020. And I'm like, well, I was busy before that, but yeah. But the thing about 2020 is it didn't cause divorce. It just revealed the true condition of your relationship. Exactly. I saw many marriages and relationships improve significantly because they finally got to come together and spend more time together and make things that should be the majors because there was more time.
And that is a great comparison because again, these financial conversations, they really do reveal a lot. And so just like COVID, it's going to bring you closer together, or it's really going to highlight that you're on very different pages. Mm-hmm. And you need to know that. You want to know that. The last thing you want to do is be surprised by that and find out that you thought you had this certain financial situation and then you really don't. Yeah. So, knowledge is almost always power.
Yep. The more you know, the better, for sure. And it's a hard reality. And sometimes it's a hard thing to even understand for yourself or to help anyone else outside of your home to understand, because it can be very subtle, very covert. And the impression given that it's not what it is, it's, you can sense that there's control and manipulation and maybe gaslighting and things going on, but you don't know how to communicate that, and you can't seem to get collaboration from anybody else on it because they don't see it. They see personas, and things that they're intended to see, and they're not seeing the reality of the situation. So I guess the second part of the how to spot it question is, once you see it, now how do you get other people to understand what you're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, surrounding yourself with some good professionals. I mean, mental health professionals are very good at helping validate your thoughts and feelings and saying, this isn't you. You're not crazy. And I mean, when you recognize financial abuse, particularly if you're a woman, if you've been at home, I mean, there's this whole sort of culture. I mean, think of almost every kind of traditional sitcom. It's like he's trying to safeguard the money and she's trying to spend the money and she's, trying to get money and sneak it to the kids. And, there's this very dysfunctional picture of how money works in marriage it's in the culture. Mm-hmm. So, often you think, well, it's not a big deal. This is just how it happens. So, surrounding yourself with, a mental health professional, if you're working with a therapist or a divorce coach, even if you're, this all too well, but a lot of people start working with divorce coaches to help them make the decision about divorce. Mm-hmm. So a coach can be very helpful in helping you work through these issues. Mm-hmm. Finding a financial professional to start you on that journey. And I always say everyone should have their own bank account, even if that's small, because, if you don't have your own credit card in your own name, like if you're just on your spouse's supplementary card, you're not building your own credit history, mm-hmm. which means that, if something happens to your spouse, it can be real, they leave you, they die, suddenly you can find yourself 50, 60 years of age and you don't really have a credit history, which means mm-hmm. you may not be able to rent an apartment. You may not be able to get a line of credit or a credit card on your own. So having, even if it's like a small credit card just for kind of personal shopping and you're spending and then paying it off on a regular basis, building a good credit history. And I think everyone should have their own account. There are a lot of really great resources on the internet. Most banks offer it, which is financial literacy, particularly aimed at women, although aimed for, all sorts of people, for youth, for, just about every kind of group. There's a specific financial literacy program. Mm-hmm. And just start to inform yourself. If you've been in a financially abusive relationship, I find the other partner will often try to make it very complex. Like, oh, you wouldn't understand this because it's like restricted share units and it's, options and swaps. And I mean, the reality is money is not that complicated. You go out, you do something, you earn the money, and then you choose, some of it you spend, some of it you save, some of it you invest. And there are fancy names for investment instruments, but at the end of the day, it's, money you're spending, money you're giving away, money you're saving for a rainy day, long-term retirement money. Yeah. It's fairly simple concepts. So you can actually get educated about it pretty quickly. And have a play fund, like have a little investment fund on your own. Mm-hmm. Get comfortable with financial terms. What's debt, what's equity, because the more you demystify it, the more it's not going to faze you. You know, and again, whether you're doing something with $100 or that translates into your life savings, it's the same language. So mm-hmm. it's something you can actually play around with a little bit and educate yourself on. And then, the reality is, and I always say this because, again, women tend to be my clients. Even if your marriage is great, you're likely going to outlive your spouse. At some point, you will be managing your money. Mm-hmm. So start small, start when things are not in a crisis point, and just start learning about it, because there's tons of free information on the internet, workshops, especially as we're reopening from COVID, like banks, credit unions will often put on financial literacy workshops. Mm-hmm. Grab a couple of girlfriends and go. You won't regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so obviously the answer to how to help other people spot it is to get educated about it yourself. And so that's what you're talking about. And one way to look at this would be just, more from a perspective of a friendship. If you've got a friend and you're starting to, or you've always sensed that there's something wrong, what do you think is the best thing for somebody in those shoes to do to help that person?
I mean, if it's a good friend, you can just kind of ask, I know women who sometimes they only ever pay for anything in cash. And it's like, that doesn't feel convenient. You're not making points. So, it's just saying, oh, you're always paying for stuff in cash. Like, do you have an aversion to credit cards? Just sort of asking a friendly question. If at lunch, it's always kind of everyone's paying with their cash, because, that is one way that people will control their spouse. It's like, mm-hmm. you cannot have access to, credit, debit, anything else. I will give you cash and you can spend that. So it's, and talk about your own financial situation. Like say, once a month, my husband and I talk about money. How How about you? I mean, most people would rather talk about just about everything else in the world, sex, their mental health. They don't want to talk about money.
Yeah.
And so by starting to destigmatize money talks, I think it normalizes that it's part of life, because money touches every area of your life. It just really does. And so it's one of those things that if people talk about it more openly, I think it's helpful. So as a friend, I would just, do a little bit of kind, hey, this is how I handle my money. How do you handle your money?
Yeah.
So
just plant seeds.
Yeah, plant some seeds, because there's a lot of shame that goes around any money issues, but particularly money and abuse, because those are both shame topics in our current society. So it's just, demystifying it a little bit, I think, is always helpful.
And just understanding what's normal and what's not. I mean, you're probably in a situation where you don't know that anybody else does it any differently. And you wouldn't understand until you could see one thing side by side, versus your situation. Is this just the way you guys have decided to do things, or is there an element of power and control that's happening? Because in a healthy relationship, in most cases, you want a partnership. You want that other person on the same page as you, with the same level of access and information to the financial picture of your family, because you don't want to do it alone. You don't want to bear that responsibility alone.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's a form of intimacy.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. And that's where I say, often the gateway conversation, because people are like, well, I don't want to just bring up money out of the blue, but it's to, say to your spouse, like, I'm recognizing that you've taken on this huge piece of our life. And I'm thankful that I haven't had to look at money until now, but I feel like we should be shouldering this responsibility together. And again, in most cases, it's going to bring you closer together. If there's a lot of resistance, though, again, that's when you start to need to lay the groundwork that you may need to extract yourself from this marriage at some point. And it's very complex when there is financial abuse. You need a lot of lead time.
Yeah. And I think we've been very generous in providing for the fact that there's going to be people who just really aren't meaning to be controlling and power hungry with all of this. It's just, a cultural norm for one party to handle everything. And so challenging that is going to feel uncomfortable and weird. But I think the reality is that a lot of times the people that you and I are helping aren't in a situation where there are subtleties and generosities behind that.
It's pretty clear. Yes.
There's definite intent for, mishandling. And so, some of the signs I think are important to look at, or, what kinds of things are people going to be seeing that are going to be evidence that this is not normal or okay?
Yeah, I think it's when there's hiding of anything. Like if all the financial papers, go immediately from the mailbox into like a locked filing cabinet. There's no reason that credit card receipts and stuff need to be in a lockbox that you don't have access to. Sometimes people will have all of their bills and everything sent to work. That's something that we see. So they don't even go to the house. Well, again, like, why? Most people actually don't want their finances disclosed to their place of work. So, if that's happening, you'd ask the question, well, why is that happening? Things like at tax time. Are you just having a signature page kind of poked at you to sign? Or are you sitting down, either yourselves if you do your own taxes or with the accountant and understanding the financial picture? Again, if things like, you're being asked to sign any financial documents, sign off on any tax forms, and you are just given the signature page, that's a warning sign. I would certainly at that point ask to see the full document. Again, just under I'd like to understand what I'm signing and educate myself. And if that's not being disclosed, then that can be problematic. So anytime there's secrecy, it's, financial infidelity and, infidelity like with another girlfriend or boyfriend, they're very similar. It's secrecy. It's, phone calls that are, everything's always password protected or in a lockbox. I think when that's happening, you're worried something's going on, and it may be that they're hiding money from you. It may also be that your spouse is hiding it from like the tax department or business partners. And when you're married to someone, you wear that too. If you're signing off on fraudulent tax statements, you can be held liable for all of that. So, just you want to be aware of what you're signing. And if there's any sense of secrecy, you're going to want to find out what you're signing, ask for disclosure. And if you're not getting that, that's a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's just all about having the conversations that are hard to have, but knowing the signs helps. And some of the things you have listed here are, is your partner stealing money from you or from the family, forcing you to give them access to your bank accounts to make transactions without your input, forcing you to sign off on a loan that you don't really want to get.
And with economic abuse, and we found this a lot over COVID, it's like hiding your laptop so that you can't, be on time for a meeting. It's sabotaging your work. Because again, that's a means of control. If you are let go from your job, suddenly you are being controlled by this person. So there's been a lot of like laptop hiding and this kind of sabotage.
Yeah.
And so, it's not necessarily what you think it is. It's anything that basically, again, it's manipulation, intimidation, and entrapment. It's that coercive control. So anything that kind of touches money, it's abusive.
Yep, absolutely. Well, so in line with the conversation about just helping other people to see what it is that's happening to you, if they're in a position of being able to help you escape this, we want to look at what action steps that we can take to change our lives. I think the first step in any healing process is to be in despair and to realize that this is not normal or okay.
Yeah.
You have to get there first.
You have to recognize that. You absolutely have to recognize that. And we so want it to not be happening. That, there will be a period where you're making excuses for it. And because it's going to be a lot to deal with. So I think a lot of people are like, no, there's an explanation for this. But once you get to that point where it's pretty clear what's happening, it's a long-term, financial safety plan to leave. And the thing that we find is that particularly in affluent abuse, financial abuse is enough to fully control your partner. And it's the point at which you start to recognize the financial and economic abuse that other forms of abuse tend to kick in. So when you're starting to ask these questions about the finances, you also need to have a safety plan because emotional abuse and physical abuse can start to kick in at this point when the controlling person is starting to feel that loss of control.
Absolutely.
So certainly having a safety plan in place. Small things like go talk to your bank manager and see about setting up your own account. And it's, people are always very worried about taking money in anticipation of a divorce because we hear these stories about people like hiding money and setting up trusts and, the judge getting really mad. The reality is though, you are able to, track it, record it, take money aside, so you can have a nest egg, so you can hire a lawyer, have an apartment. Like, as long as you're tracking it so that when you have your lawyer, you can say, look, I kind of whirled away $5,000 out of the assets and it'll all be adjusted in the divorce process.
Right.
But too many people are afraid of like taking the money that they don't take what they need to escape their abuser. And so my advice is, you skim from the grocery money. If you're on a cash allowance, you start setting money away. It's not the time to let pride get in the way. Talk to friends, talk to family, because you will very likely need a lawyer because you're going to want disclosure. There's a power imbalance, and mediation can be very tricky when there's abuse or a major power imbalance. And good mediators know to screen for financial abuse, which is great, but you will need some money. It's a long-term strategy to leave a financial abuser. So it's kind of getting a little bit of money together. For people who can't access any money, I mean, in most places, financial abuse is seen as intimate partner violence. And so you can talk to a woman's shelter, you can talk to legal aid and see if there are any small things that they can do for you for free or, through a kind of free consultation in terms of, like getting if accounts are being liquidated, getting those frozen, or getting access to money if your name isn't on any account. So there are often small measures that you can put in place, gather enough funds to then hire a lawyer who has expertise in this area. And that, begins the exit strategy. So it's a very tricky time. Yeah. And too many people they're nice. And they think, well, I shouldn't take them. It's like, you've had your money taken for years.
Yeah.
If you need to, take little bits here and again. And again, keep track of it. Keep the Interac receipt if you have, access to small amounts of money. Like, keep track of it. Yeah. And your lawyer can figure all of that out. But the reality is you need money to be able to hire a professional to help you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the trap.
I hear that a lot, that people feel like they're being mean, or they're afraid of his reaction, or they just don't think it's right for them to take the money. It's like, it's half yours. So there's not really going to be any judge in the nation that's going to tell you that you can't have your half.
Yeah, as long as you keep track of it and it's not being seen as you're stealing it or hiding it.
And you're using it for basic survival needs. You're not going out and buying a new car,
Absolutely.
It's the motivation for the use of the money as well. And one tip I will give is, you mentioned earlier, go talk to your bank manager. It would be really natural if you have an established relationship with your bank to go do that. But I advise against that, because I've seen more than one time where that has backfired on somebody, because especially in a small environment where you're just known as a part of a couple, mistakes can be made. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Great seeing your wife in the other week.
Yeah.
And I do find also, I've had found good success through credit unions, because credit unions are they're quite people focused. And so, that can be a good place to start a conversation. So that's excellent advice, is, choosing another financial institution. Absolutely. And let them know what you're facing. Again, people never want to say, this is what's happening, because again, there's so much shame around it, even though the only person who should be shamed is the perpetrator. Right. But you can say, look, I suspect this is what's happening to me. So, I'm starting to lay the groundwork. And some financial institutions, are starting to have their staff be trained on this. They're very trained around elder financial abuse, people taking advantage of old people and, taking out their accounts. Yeah. But they're starting to be more and more educated about that in this realm, which is good news.
Yeah, it is. That's really good news. Hello, listeners. This is Annie. I just wanted to remind you that you don't have to do divorce alone. If you've been listening for any length of time, you know that I'm a certified divorce and life transition coach and an RCSD divorce realtor. Maybe you're just here gathering courage and information for a future divorce decision. But if not, and you're in the middle of a divorce and you're struggling with these kinds of issues, please don't feel like you can't afford the help you need. I'm so thankful to be able to provide you with this free resource. And I know from the feedback I get from listeners like you that there is a lot of help being found here. But there is more, and you can afford it. Here are 4 ways you can get more help from starting over stronger. 1, the least expensive investment you can make with starting over stronger is just $5 to $20 a month as a Patreon subscriber. You just go to patreon.com/SOS divorce, and that's spelled patreon.com/SOS divorce to see what new content you can expect with this small investment. Number 2, the next size investment you can make in yourself is in the weekly support groups that are offered through Starting Over Stronger for just $55 a month, where you will be a part of a growing group of women learning about toxic relationship recovery, clarity, divorce survival, and Life 2.0 divorce recovery. These groups of women just like you are learning and getting support from one another in some incredible ways. The newest group meets on Monday evenings from 6 to 7 p.m. Central, and you can email me at Annie@startingoverstronger.com to learn more, or sign up at meetup.com by searching Starting Over Stronger Toxic Relationship Recovery. 3, if you need to sell or buy a home in Kansas or Missouri as part of your divorce, I offer dedicated divorce real estate consulting assistance to ensure that you're making the smartest decision possible about the marital home, whether you keep, sell, refi, or want to buy something new for yourself. You can email me at Annie@startingoverstronger.com so I can help you be sure you're making the best decision about your home. And if you don't live in Kansas or Missouri, I can make a recommendation for you to another RCSD realtor who will be able to provide you with these same divorce-related services. And fourth, and most importantly, we all struggled through our divorces in ways we couldn't have imagined we would have to when it all started. This is why I got certified as a divorce and life transition coach. I wanted to save women time, money, and stress during their divorce. And private divorce coaching may seem like an expensive luxury that you can't afford, but I assure you it is the exact opposite. It is a critically important service that will reduce your attorney's fees, help you get your words and actions aligned with your goals and dreams, which will ultimately reduce your stress and probably shorten the duration of your divorce process. So if that sounds good to you, visit startingoverstronger.com and book a discovery call now. It will cost you nothing to find out how divorce coaching can help. So as you can see, Starting Over Stronger offers a variety of tools for you to grab a hold of during your divorce so you don't have to do it alone. Reach out for the help you need. I'm here when you need me.
Okay, so I was thinking about a concept that I've heard of, unconscious resistance. Have you heard about that?
No.
It may sound familiar as I explain it, but it's just a process of change, and really it applies to almost anything. But think of anything you've ever had to overcome as I explain it. So at first, you're unconsciously accepting or agreeing to a wrongdoing, completely unaware that it is even a problem, and that's what we've been talking about here today. You're playing your part in it, like when someone is actively partaking in an addiction, for another example. Yeah. And then secondly, you become conscious of the problem. So now it's conscious acceptance. You go on playing your part as you begin seeing it for what it is, coming to a consciousness about it, but it's a process. And so you're in agreement with it still, even as you become conscious of it. And then a decision is made to begin resistance. Okay. And so then you're consciously resisting whatever the wrongdoing is. You're aware of it. You're actively taking steps to stop participating in it. You're educating yourself about finances. You're putting processes in place to protect yourself. You've created a new account at a new financial institution. Yeah. You're conscious of it and you're resisting it. And then lastly, the stage that we all want to be at is where you're unconsciously resisting it. Now you're no longer playing any part in it. Your actions, your words, and your behaviors have all adjusted so much to the new way of living that you don't have to actively think about it anymore because it's become who you are now.
I love that.
It's an amazing way to encapsulate any kind of change that is happening in somebody's life. And I think it helps because it takes a little bit of the pressure off, because we put so much pressure on ourselves when we suddenly become aware of something. There's just so much like beating yourself up. Why did I do this? Why have I let this go on so long? And it just kind of helps a person to understand that it's a process. Change doesn't happen overnight.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a forgiveness of yourself that has to happen. I do trauma-informed money coaching as well. And it's really making peace with, that's what I did then because that's what I knew then. Or that's what I did then to survive. Right. And it's forgiving yourself for that. I mean, a lot of women really do get angry with themselves when they realize that they're, a certain age and middle age, and they're like, how could I have allowed this to happen? How could I not have seen this? How could I? And it's like, because it worked until now. You were, busy raising kids. You were busy maybe trying to save a marriage. So the process of forgiving yourself really helps you move forward because, we can't go back in time, but we have now. And it's a good opportunity to learn. I mean, my aunt, who was the one with the drawer full of $20 bills, she ended up running an investment club and teaching other widows like herself to manage their money. They ended up being really successful because, she went from like, the drawer is empty, what am I going to do? To really understanding, investments. And her, son's now a stockbroker. I mean, they really get the money thing. And you'll get there. So like you say, at some point, this will just be your new normal and you will know about money and you will be running your own life and you will feel independent. But in the beginning, it doesn't feel like that for anybody.
No,
and money is scary. I mean, I'm twice divorced. And so I've had to do the financial disclosure thing twice. I'm an MBA in finance. I worked as an investment banker. You would think this would be really easy, but it's personal. Because when you're looking on paper and you're going through with, your lawyer, a third party, their lawyer, and you're like, oh, this is what I spent. I should have saved more. How could I have been so stupid? And again, it's giving yourself grace and forgiveness because you did what you did when you knew what you knew. And now you're going to know better. And you're going to do better. And I mean, the wonderful thing then about controlling your own money, especially after you've been in a financially abusive situation, is clients find this freedom. Like it takes them so long when they're like, well, I can't do this and I can't do this because, they're still living in that controlled perspective. All of a sudden they're like, so I could write a check to a charity I really, really believe in. And I can just do that. Or I can go get a job. Like I've always sort of been told I can't get a job. I can go get a job. I can invest in things I believe in. Like it is a moment of freedom, which is so cool to witness.
Oh yeah.
So I always say, I know you feel this way now, and I wish I could give you like a magic wand so you could see yourself 5 years from now. Cause 2 years from now, even, everything is going to be different.
Yeah. But it's just the process of life that, like the butterfly has to be in that cocoon and fight its way out all by itself. You can't help it. It has to do it on its own to have the strength that it needs to fly. So, and this is so much like that. It's so much like that. And the hard part, the getting out of the cocoon part is boundaries. And just, now that you understand what's going on and what the options are and you've educated yourself and you're aware of what's happening, you have to start setting some parameters around it. And like you've mentioned, that can be a safety issue in some situations. And unfortunately, sometimes it's when you don't suspect it, because it's not always predictable when someone is going to become violent. But
absolutely,
it is definitely the time at which it peaks the most. As far as the potential for danger because of the loss of control that's happening. So obviously you have to assess your level of physical safety and be mindful that you may underestimate that.
Secrecy is often weaponized by abusers because people don't want to talk about this, but it is one of those things to kind of, give a soft heads up to the school to people often don't even let their divorce lawyers know because it feels so taboo, but it's like you need to let the people in your life, in your inner circle know that this is what you're facing because they can help look out for you.
Yeah, especially your attorney. I mean, they build their whole strategy based around all of the circumstances involved in the personal relationship. And that involves not only finances, but sexuality and emotionality and practicality. I mean, literally every single facet of your life matters to your attorney. A good attorney is going to want to know the whole picture in order to strategize your case well. Yeah.
And you're going to want to see their reaction. If they're not comfortable with this, they're not the attorney for you. I find often, again, women in particular, they will go out and find an attorney who is very much like their former spouse was, controlling, narcissistic,
somebody that'll tell me what to do.
And it's because it feels comfortable.
Yep.
And I'm like, you are now in the driver's seat when it comes to hiring your attorney. And this is a wonderful opportunity to practice your boundaries. If your attorney says they're going to call you at 2:00 on a Friday and they're not calling you, you can hold them accountable to that. You know, you said you were going to do this and you didn't, and I'm the client, I'm going to put some boundaries around this and have some expectations. And lawyers can take it. I always say that I have a lot of friends who are lawyers, and I love divorce lawyers. I think they're great people, but I'm like, they can take it. They're tough. Yeah. So practice your boundaries. If you over pivot, they're fine with it. They're used to being yelled at.
They're used to working with people that are maybe not themselves.
Exactly. So practice those boundaries and, say like, and let them know I have just come out of a very difficult relationship. I'm going to require a certain treatment, and you can dictate that. I mean, they're going to say, well, if you want me to be really high touch, then it's going to be more expensive because they charge for their time. Yeah. But you can negotiate what your relationship with your lawyer is going to look like.
Yeah. And that kind of self-advocacy is really hard for somebody that's used to being controlled, but it is something that they need to be challenged with. And hopefully, they get connected with a coach because that is inevitable. I mean, it's incredible value to especially that person who doesn't really know how to have their own agency. And to make decisions. They haven't been allowed to. And I mean, I've had clients where I've had to have that challenging conversation with them that, look, what you're doing right now is expecting your attorney to treat you the way that your spouse has been. Yeah. He's not going to do that. I know this attorney. He's not going to control the outcome. He's going to let you make the decisions. And you're gathering all the resources you need to make these decisions. You're going to have to pull the trigger at some point. Yeah. And it's hard, but you have to trust that once you've gathered all the information and you have a good representative and you've got a coach, that you're going to be okay. And will it necessarily go all the way you expected and want it to? No. But when something happens that you're not expecting or that wasn't what you wanted or needed, you pivot and you figure it out. Yeah. Because that's life. That's just how life is. You have to take action. I heard it recently said, take massive, imperfect action. Yes. Do not just sit back and think that, that's, the perfection thing, how you overcome perfection is massive, imperfect action. Yeah. And learning to trust your ability to roll with the punches.
Yeah. And that's where coaches like role play with a coach. And, if you can't afford a coach, role play with a friend, join a codependency 12-step group. Because often there's codependency issues when there's been financial abuse. And just the more community, and it also, you'll meet other people who've gone through it. Yeah. So it's, secrecy is not your friend in divorce. Passivity is not your friend in divorce. No. Surround yourself with community. If you can afford a coach, definitely hire a coach. Find an attorney who really does advocate for you. Yeah. And, start to take back your power. As you mentioned, agency, right? You need to start to, no one's going to give you agency. Agency is one of those things you need to take. Yeah. So it's,
And, that's the hard part really, in getting the team of people around you that you need for the kind of support that you're going to need to get out of this situation is hard because you're already you're compromised, in several ways, but also you're coming up against stigmas and cultural mindsets from every professional you meet. And that includes your lawyer, the judge, your guardian ad litem, your child custody evaluators. These people are going to be making huge decisions in your life. Yeah. And sometimes you have no control over who they are. They're picked for you. But where you do have that control, it is imperative that the person that you choose to work with understands covert abuse. Yes. If you get the sense that they don't, walk away. Yeah. Because they will destroy your case. Absolutely. They will leave you destitute and not having the relationship with your children that you should be having. Yeah. So it is detrimental to so many cases when a professional doesn't understand the nature of this kind of insidious abuse that happens. And unfortunately, it's just all too common. There's so much education that needs to happen in the judicial process.
Oh, for sure. Lawyers
all the way around.
And even financial advisors. Like if there's a power imbalance and there's a financial neutral working for you, often the financial neutral is running all of these scenarios for the one more aggressive party. And then, if you're sort of sitting back, like, even though they are a neutral, it's hard to be a neutral if there's a power imbalance. So, you may have to say, okay, you've run these 5 scenarios from my ex's point of view. Let's run 5 opposite scenarios, that kind of benefit me and see where it all shakes out. So it is that advocacy work, which is where, coach, 12-step program, friends, they have your back because you need to be strong in divorce. Yeah. It's a tough process, and coming out of an abuse background, you're going to feel re-traumatized a lot. So that's where self-care, breathing exercises, sleep, nutrition, walks, surrounding yourself with good people. The more you can support your nervous system, the better off you're going to be in any of these discussions.
Yes.
So, I'm a CDFA MBA, but I'll often start out with like breathing exercises, which always was like, this isn't why we hired you. But it's like, until you get your nervous system calm, it's just words I'm going to be showing. It's not going to be meaningful at all. We're wasting our time. You need to be receptive, and that means your nervous system has to be calm.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good point. And self-care needs to be a part-time job for a while after all this. And you've got a long list of resources and advocacy groups here that I'm not going to run through, but I will just say, listeners, if you need resources like legal aid and women's shelters and economic abuse screening tools and all of these things that Jen has provided here, I would love to get that to you. So you can just contact me directly at Annie@startingoverstronger.com, and I will either get you connected directly to Jen, or I will provide you with that information and those tools. But the thing that we want to close out with today is the hope that there is restoration on the other side of this. And that is the thing that most people can't really grasp, and why they stay, because they really can't see themselves outside of this situation.
Yeah.
And so we want to give the hope that it is absolutely possible. We help people do it every day. Jen and I both, and so many other people, are working with freeing women and the men who are affected by this from this kind of control and abuse that's happening, that's limiting their life. And so what thoughts do you have on restoration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is really what my business is all about. I'm a big believer in, no grit, no pearl. These things that challenge us make us stronger. A lot of people who come out on the other side end up going into, coaching professions, social work. Some go into being financial literacy specialists because they become so impassioned about saving other people from this kind of trauma. So I have only ever seen good stories on the other side. In the middle, it feels so messy and so uncomfortable. But on the other side of it, there is always goodness. And usually people want to really focus their efforts on helping others. So I've seen some really beautiful outcomes. And what you're feeling today, if you're listening to this and you feel like this is happening to you and it feels so overwhelming, it's like one thing at a time, one day at a time. Maybe today you just breathe and calm your nervous system down. And then tomorrow you'll go and research something on the internet about, a financial institution in your community that looks like it might be one you want to talk to. It's just little by little making progress, and you'll get there. Yeah.
And when you can't find your own strength, find somebody else's that you can borrow. You can always borrow mine. I used to have none either. So it is something you can build up toward. So, well, wow, this was a lot. I want to give you a chance, though, before we close, to share anything else that you want to share about how to understand and escape financial abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. I've set up a free portal. You just, sign up because it's behind a wall just for privacy's sake, but there's no cost associated with it, called Lunch at the Club. And I'm gathering just information about, financial abuse and some of the options that you have. I mean, there's all sorts of, litigation financing. There's all sorts of stuff that, goes beyond what we can discuss in an episode. But, I'm just using it as a portal to gather information. So it's free to go there and access some resources. There are people out there to help you. And most of us in the divorce profession, we've been through it. So, we know it. We've survived. We're on the other side. So there is always hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how to never fall into it again. I think number one is be okay alone.
Yes.
For a long time.
Yes.
Be
I'm very
okay
happily alone. I love it.
Yeah. Don't get in another relationship until it adds something to your life, like the icing on the cake. Yeah. I use this analogy all the time. You have to have an egg to have cake. You don't have to have icing.
Yes.
Cake tastes really good without icing. Yes. But, you don't want that new relationship to be that egg that holds the cake together. You need to make the cake yourself. And then when the timing is right and you are perfectly fine alone, you almost kind of grieve the fact that you won't be anymore. But someone comes along who's the icing on the cake, and you learn the value of your place in the world and their place in the world, and how to co-create something together in a way that is nothing like what you've just come out of. So give yourself that grace and that time. And so thank you for sitting down with me today to explore.
Well, thank you for
this.
having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I would be willing to bet the vast majority of people have never even heard the words financial and abuse strung together. So it's always my pleasure to bring this kind of education into the global conversation. As a former participant in it, it is my deep pleasure to bring it out into the light and to help people understand how to free themselves from it. Listeners, if this is your first time hearing about financial abuse, I want to just say, first of all, that I am deeply sorry that you're experiencing this. I know it's very disruptive to your peace and your place of wellness and safety. And this isn't about money, right? It's about your freedom and your clarity and your place in the world. And so we want you to be able to explore how to get those needs met. And if no one else has ever said that to you, that they're sorry that this is where you found yourself, I just want you to know that someone is, and that there is hope and help for a totally different life than you've ever known. So hang in there and reach out and get the help you need. Again, my email is Annie@startingoverstronger.com. You can also visit that website, startingoverstronger.com, to book a discovery call with me or find out more about getting the team of support that you need. Just remember, you don't have to do divorce alone. There's help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.